The main headline to come out of Wednesday night's football was what happened down at the Vitality Football. Christian Romero, the Tottenham Hotspur defender, appeared to have accused the club's hierarchy of telling lies in an explosive social media post. This was pretty shortly after the 3-2 defeat down at Bournemouth. So what is the latest, Alex Crook?
Well, it's incredible, isn't it? The number of clubs who seem determined to implode from within. He did take a slightly more consolatory take on Thursday morning, Romero, by actually taking out the word liars, which is how he described the Tottenham hierarchy in the immediate aftermath of that defeat down at Bournemouth. But you had Mickey van der Ven getting involved in a verbal spat with the travelling Tottenham supporters. You had the ridiculous questioning, in my opinion, of Thomas Frank for drinking out of an Arsenal cup. Clearly, that was a mistake. The cup was left over from Bournemouth's weekend defeat at home to their North London rivals. But I get it optically when Thomas Frank is under pressure. It's not great. I think there's a lot of frustration. And why are the Tottenham players so unhappy? Are they unhappy at the lack of signings? Or, as you suspected quite early on, Sam, are they unhappy because they don't believe that Thomas Frank, the former Brentford manager, is the man to lead them? I think it's probably a combination of the two. But either way, this looks pretty damning now for Frank. I thought they played all right, Tottenham. At 2-2, Mickey van der Ven has a header, which is brilliantly saved by Petrovic, one of the few saves he's made, actually, the Bournemouth keeper, in recent weeks. If that goes in, we could be talking about another away victory. And you have to remember, before last night, only Arsenal had taken more points on the road than Spurs. I don't think it was a performance that deserved booing. It certainly wasn't lack of effort, lack of endeavour. You can't accuse Thomas Frank of negative tactics. In fact, the second half was probably as much like an Ange Postecoglou game as we've seen this season. But these Spurs fans are not having him. And I don't think that is going to change anytime soon.
Tottenham are 14th in the Premier League after 21 games, the exact same position as they were last season under Ange Postecoglou. Then Postecoglou decided to prioritise the Europa League. I wonder if Thomas Frank is going to prioritise the Champions League, Scott. You know, could be a possibility. They were 8 points above 17th, the position they ultimately finished, but are only 6 above Nottingham Forest, who are in that place now. Only 4 teams have had fewer shots this season than Spurs, although they have been clinical with their 30 goals better than 8 other teams, so their conversion rate is particularly high. But it hasn't been swashbuckling, entertaining football, despite the second half performance yesterday. They also rank 16 in the Premier League for touches in the opposition penalty area, but top another unwanted stat, errors leading to shots. What's the problem, and is Thomas Frank rightly being scrutinised?
Yeah, I mean, he's rightly being scrutinised, but this is a Tottenham Hotspur club that really has been in disarray for years off the pitch with the way that they've dealt with the transfers. You know, yes, they've stepped it up in terms of actually bringing players in, but, you know, the wages to transfer fees tells you that actually they're not buying ready-made players that can take them forwards. And look, you know, well done to Spurs. And they've shut up a few people for a few years in terms of not winning a trophy for so long. But you judge a team on the table, and those 3 last season were always going to go straight down. Spurs were the worst team of the rest. So it was such a massive, massive job. And look, I really feel for Thomas Frank. I feel like if he's given time and money, he can turn it around. I do think he's capable of making the step up. I think, as Crookie says, the Arsenal Cup is just really big man up there. Did you really have to do that to me right now? Optically, it just looks terrible, but it's not important at all. There's so much wrong. Look, he's still got a lot of injuries. Don't forget, going forward, the likes of Kulusevski and Solanke, Maddison. So there's a problem there. And as Quickie was saying, they played well, actually, at the Vitality and could easily have nicked it themselves. But sometimes if a fan base isn't going to have a manager, it makes it very, very difficult to turn it around. I want to see him given at the very least towards the end of the season. I want to see ENIC and the Lewis family coming out and making a statement, or at least the sporting directors. Too many sporting directors. You and I touched it on air when we were talking at the Fulham-Chelsea game. Sporting directors don't come out and take enough responsibility. It's all about the manager all the time. And I feel for him. He's a good manager. He is ready to step up, but he needs help, and he's not been given that.
This is the key thing, isn't it? You know, there's so many sporting directors that pull the strings at football clubs. They bring in the players, they hire the managers. Yeah, it's the manager, the head coach, the man who just all the responsibility he has is on that first team. It's him, not the scouting department, not the medical department. The guy who runs the sporting empire is in charge of all that. We, as journalists, need to sharpen our focus on those people. We must focus on them a little bit more now, because the head coaches are getting a lot of flack. They draw the ire of the supporters when things don't go wrong. But actually, the people that make the biggest decisions in the football club in terms of personnel are the sporting directors, and they need to come under our glare. And that's our responsibility to make sure that we do that. Fabio Paratici is the man at the moment who is in charge of this window. Whether or not he's still there at the end of the window is a different matter, Crook. But I said to you on air a week ago that they will not spend money in this window. And I suppose what Christian Romero is alluding to is just that, isn't he?
Yeah, and I'll take you back to that seismic night when Daniel Levy, out of nowhere, was relieved of his duties. I went on air and I said this is because they want to sell the football club. They think that having Daniel Levy still front and centre with the toxic relationship that he has with the Spurs fans would hamper that process. Tottenham sources hit back at that. They said, no. The Lewis family are invested. They're in it for the long haul. They just want to prioritise sporting success. And I remember saying to you at the time, let's see if they actually put their money where their mouth is. They want to sell the football club. They're not interested in pumping hundreds of millions into the team. Otherwise, they would have done it in the summer. Why wait until the end of the transfer window to get rid of Daniel Levy? I think a lot of Tottenham fans have been fooled into thinking this is going to be a brave new era. It's not, guys. It's the same ownership. It wasn't Daniel Levy who was reluctant to spend money. Okay, he was a very frugal operator, but he was simply acting under instructions from those above. Newsflash, they're still the same people making the big decisions.
What is really interesting, and going back to the sort of debate about sporting directors and head coaches, I suppose, is that over the last 6 months, let's say 6 months, we've seen a trend where the football people have started to bite back at the business people. And if you listen to Enzo Maresca, Ruben Amorim, now Cuco Romero, they are basically saying that there is a divide between the football people and the business people. The business people want to control costs, think that they know how to run an enterprise, but the football people are saying the two don't mesh properly. Ruben Amorim saying, if you want me to be a success, I have to be able to bring in these players and do this. Enzo Maresca, if you want me to be a success with this group of players, you have to allow me to do this. But the restrictions that are being placed on them from above are, in their opinions, hampering them. And I think you've seen a more vocal football department biting back at the lack of scrutiny that the sporting directors and the business arms of the football clubs are actually under. Scott Minto.
Look, you're absolutely spot on. And I always try to put myself into the other person's shoes. And in terms of the owners, if they either haven't got the money or don't want to put it in, they're the ones who's putting their hand in their pocket. But if they don't, come out and say it. Come out and say, look, we're not doing this. And don't leave the head coaches there to get all the flack. Because, you know, we can talk about Enzo Maresca. Whether we like him or not, I liked him, you not so much, but I thought he did a great job.
That's not true. That's
Okay.
not true. I just wasn't in love with him. There's a difference.
I'm not in love with him. I'm just trying to defend him. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is there's a new breed of head coach that actually we sort of think, oh, well, don't fight with the owners because there's only one winner. But they know what they're doing. You can talk about Nuno Espirito Santo when he was at Forest as well. Add him to the equation of those head coaches. They know what they're doing, and they're not willing to work under the parameter that is being given. Now, I totally agree with you. Everyone's saying Enzo Maresca, they spent $1.5 billion, should be fighting for a Premier League title. This is absolutely terrible. Why are you taking off certain players? He's not in control. And if he's not in control, then it needs to be out there that the head coach is just a part of the cogs of the wheel, when actually the whole thing comes from the sporting directors and the owners. We need to hear that.
Yes, we do. Obviously, the world is on fire at the moment. Frank is under scrutiny. How much scrutiny is he under, Crook, could there be a possibility that they end up moving on from him before they play Aston Villa live on talkSPORT at the weekend? Or is that something that you think will be put on the back burner? How much pressure is he under?
I'd be surprised because I think the hierarchy really want Thomas Frank to work out, particularly the chief executive, is it, Vinay, who came in from Arsenal in the summer. They seem to have a really close relationship. But it's difficult when almost an entire fan base seems to have turned against the manager. I think it's very difficult to win that around. And as I say, I do wonder, how much of Romero's frustration, how much of Van der Ven's frustration, as well as being aimed at the board, is also being aimed at the manager. And I think you can't not come back to those images on the pitch when both Van der Ven and Jed Spence refused to acknowledge his handshake. That probably was where it all started to really unravel for Thomas Frank.
I've got no confirmation of this in any way, shape or form, but I woke up on Thursday morning. Crook got annoyed at me because I didn't answer his phone call. But I woke up on Thursday morning to several messages about the situation at Tottenham. And I thought then, listen, there's no sort of imminent announcement, I don't think, but I do think that there's a problem here. Scott?
Yeah, look, the only thing I'd say is about that particular incident. I mean, maybe football has moved on, but that used to happen all the time. The managers used to say things, and when you're in that real mindset of you've just lost a game, you're gutted, the fans are on at you, the manager might say something to you and you might tell him where to go. So back in the day, I wouldn't read too much into that. Now there might be a little bit more, but there's just bits and sort of pieces of this jigsaw that seem to be coming together that add towards, I worry that something's going to happen. And but ultimately, it is down to the owners. And if the owners realize what's going on, they need to, if not come out and give it the dreaded vote of confidence, but actually then just say to Thomas, look, we're going to look after you. We're going to give you some money. But the worry is, as Crook has just said, actually, that's not what they're about here. That they're just about trying to sell the club.
I think the next few games are vital, Sam, aren't they? Because obviously we're going to preview Aston Villa in the FA Cup. You would imagine Unai Emery might make changes for that game. Thomas Frank is going to have to name his strongest possible team to try and keep that dream of silverware alive. West Ham at home is a game they simply have to win, but we know about the rivalry between the two teams. Burnley away is their other Premier League fixture they've got left in January. Again, that has to be a must-win. And then they've got Dortmund at home and Frankfurt away, two tough Champions League games. Obviously, it's not a guarantee they make the top 8 in that competition. So I think he'll get a little bit more time. But if results don't improve over those matches, then I think the Spurs board will have a decision to make. And there were whispers at the game last night that Mohamed Kudus' injury is not going to be short-term. Obviously, they've already sold Brennan Johnson. That does leave them really short in the wide areas. And has anyone seen Dominic Solanke, by the way?
No, not for a while. Have you?
It's bizarre. It's almost like we don't talk about the fact that Tottenham's record signing is out injured and has been since the start of the season.
Yeah, and he was talking about that, wasn't he, this week? Kulusevski's still out, and it's not a short-term problem. Maddison has obviously been out for a long time and will be, which is an issue too, which is all the things he's having to deal with.